All right, welcome Sanjay. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. So I knew Sanjay. Sanjay was my client previously when he was working at Google, and he was in India and he came to China actually. We worked on a project together. That's how I know him. And thank you for keeping in touch. And yeah, so I thought of inviting you because you have such a depth of experience in UX research. So Sanjay has worked for organizations like Samsung, Google, ABB Research, and currently at Amazon. So he is in Seattle, just the south of us right now. And you've probably used some of the product that he has been involved in, researched in. And Amazon, Seller, Central Platform, Files by Google, Android TV, Google Android Keyboard, the Samsung Voice, Samsung Tizen OX smartphone, and Samsung Pay and Samsung School. Okay, so Sanjay has a PhD in IxDA and also design from IIT Bombay in India. He has invented, got 6 granted as 14 pending patents on novel user interaction technologies, and an author of 20 scientific publications on HCI and UX. So wow. Welcome, Sanjay. So I would like to, first maybe have you talk a little bit about your UX journey, like how you came about, doing UX and how you came to America, right? Yeah.
Yes, sure. I'm actually looking forward to this interaction today. Yeah, when Elaine connected with me again, so we know each other for maybe 4 or 5 years since we have worked together, and this was an opportunity to be interacting with a lot of researchers, a lot of budding professionals in the UX field. So I thought this is a great opportunity. So I'm actually looking forward to this 1 full hour or maybe more of good questions and good interactions. So as you asked me, Elaine, my journey as a UX researcher. So let me just go back and just tell you how it all started and where I am right now and where I'm going towards. So I've been a UX researcher for around, it's been 12 or 13 years now. Prior to that, my education was in semiconductor devices, which means I actually started as a computer science researcher. I started working in nothing related to UX, nothing related to HCI or design. I didn't know these fields long back. I was very happily working as a researcher in distributed system, networking, computer science. It all happened when I was working as a researcher in a company called ABB. And there we had a usability lab. I happened to do a research project, a UX research project. Which means that was not my direct project, but I started assisting somebody for a UX research project. And I really love this space. I started working with some of the designers, some of the researchers in that space, and I started liking this field. It was good that I had very good mentors initially who let me do some project on my own. So that was my starting of my journey and my passion with UX research. I didn't know these earlier. So from one project to the other in the same company, things were going good. But when I thought probably if I want to establish myself as a UX researcher, I didn't have the education, the background, or the profile of a UX researcher. So what should I do? I thought maybe it's time for me to, if I want to excel in this field, I might have to take up a degree. And the next set of degree, which I was looking for, maybe do a PhD, why not? So I started a PhD program. I got admission. I left my job, by the way, during that time. And I was really excited to take up this as my next career. I started PhD in design and HCI. I started learning those fields. I started spending more time taking more courses because I was from a different field at that point of time. More and more, for 1 or 2 years, I started reading and taking a lot of courses, whichever kind of courses which were relevant for UX research, design, I started taking those up, reading more books in that area, and developing my knowledge. Then later on, in order to support my family financially, I had to take a job, and I continued my research for my PhD. I joined as a researcher in Samsung. I was the only researcher in the team. There were around 50 designers in a pool of design team, and I was the first researcher in that team.
This was in
That
Bombay, right?
so no, this is in Bangalore in
Oh,
India.
Bangalore. Okay. I see.
And there my journey as a professional UX researcher just started. Initially, I got into a lot of different types of projects, different types of products, various different domains of products. I started working on education domain for Samsung products. I worked on operating system for phones. I worked on domains like voice, accessibility. So at that phase of my career as a UX researcher, I took up everything, or whatever was coming to me, because I was working with a pool of designers working on different products, and I was the only researcher in the team, as I
Do
said.
they understand what you do when you're the only person?
Yeah, so my early part of, and I belong to that kind of generation, probably say 10 or 12 years ago when I started, where you have to evangelize what you are doing as a researcher. It's not the case right now. The profession of a UX researcher, or the role of a UX researcher in a team or any org, is pretty much well defined right now. People do understand, but during that time, being the only researcher in the team, what I'm supposed to do, what kind of skills I bring to the table, and where my skills should be used in the product, those were not known. So I was also exploring along with my org, along with my team. What really worked out was like supporting the design team in different phases of those products where they work, working with different product managers in different product areas. So what I was learning was first the organization culture. The second was how the product cycle works in an org, right from the initial conceptualization phase to design phase to iteration in terms of design and research, and then going towards the testing and then launching of those products. I was getting more and more aware of that. So that really helped. That kind of experience really helped. What also helped is the kind of diversity which I got at that point of time, which means I was working in various different technologies, working with different types of user groups, by the way, and working with different user groups and different phases of the products. I had to use different types of research methods. So all that which I have learned, I was trying to apply here and learn more and more. So that was the phase where I learned and kind of slowly started getting the mastery of the research, be it quantitative research, be it qualitative research, every kind of methods. Going forward, what I also realized is that if I want to step up as a researcher, doing the research methods, doing your research right might not be enough. You might have to amplify your impact in the product. And that was the time I built the team. I built a team in Samsung. I managed the team slowly, building from one-person team initially to, at one point of time, I had my team, which was size of 6, making the impact multiple folds in the organization, so that my team members were working in different areas in the product, different parts of products. So that has been my journey initially. What also I learned during that time is the technical skill of research is one thing. The other thing is more of an collaborative skill, which means you're working closely with the stakeholders, solving their problem, making them take right decisions at the right point of time, being the user champion for the company. So that is where slowly I realized that impact is very important for any research. So from Samsung, then I moved to Google. There I scaled up my research further. I was leading another team in Google. I did a lot of international research that you were referring to, Elaine. Worked on even more different diverse type of products. I was also part of some of the teams in Google, even after being in such a big corporate, still I was part of a team which was more of a startup culture. Worked in a team where there were just 5 of us taking the ideas right from scratch till launch. So I worked in those teams. So all of these experience really helped me a lot initially.
So you mean inside Google, there are startup teams, that operate like a startup. Is that right?
Yes, in fact, many of these orgs, even Amazon, there are teams which work like this. Let me give reference to Google where I was working. I was part of the next billion user team in Google. And the whole idea of that team, the whole goal of that team was to work on new opportunity areas for next billion users. Next billion users is a market concept, which means we will focus on users and their needs on emerging markets. So we would take up those areas, those new opportunities in the product, which was kind of overlooked by a big products for Google, like YouTube or search or ads. They're made for developed markets. So we were looking for smaller opportunities wherever there is an opportunity in emerging markets. So I got to work in various different types of projects there in Google. So that was my experience working in different types of products, different technologies, different research methods, different types of teams. Yeah, and I continue that. I'm still learning. I'm part of Amazon, which is, again, a different kind of culture, different kind of a product where I'm part of, but I'm still trying to apply things which I have learned for a period of time. So here I'm in Amazon, I'm working in the seller's experience. Sellers, you can consider this is the other side of the e-commerce, which people don't know much about as buyers on e-commerce, but I work to improve the experience of sellers and vendors who sell on Amazon platform. It's a whole different kind of world for those users trying to understand and improve their experience on our platform. So yeah, that has been my journey. The highlight has been more in terms of the diversity that has given me a lot of knowledge and like encouragement. Yeah.
Let me drill a little bit more in, because it sounds like when you first started your career, there was no formal user research education and you were working on your PhD along the way. Is that how that works? How that worked?
It worked out for me. It might work out for a few others as well. But during that time when I started, and I'm referring to the time maybe more than 10 years ago, there were less of people who are in the profession of UX researchers. And still in countries like India, there are a lot of courses around design. There are institutes which gives you design degrees, but there are no formal courses on research or research methods.
So how do you know what to learn and what not to learn? Like, how do you decipher from all this noise in the market of,
What actually worked out for me was learn everything. So I mean, and the second thing was, especially it's a craft. It's more of the research and the design is more of skilled work or more of a crafts work. The major learning happens while you are working. Major learning happens even in the education, in the institutes. Generally, research or design is taught not through books, but while doing the projects, while collaborating on projects, taking the design decisions, and knowing why you are taking those decisions. So in summary, yes, there is a lot of noise, and the noise is more right now because a lot of people have come into this field. There are a lot of blogs, there are a lot of education material, but the key things, what you learn is when you learn during the projects which you take up, the real life projects, that is at least that has worked out for me.
So actual work experience is more important then, right? Okay, so with the diversity in your journey as a user researcher, like anything that interesting you want to share on like how challenging it was, or what any special projects that you can talk about, the humps that you've been through, and how did you convince other people?
Yeah, so in fact, I really enjoyed diversity. It was more of an interest than of a challenge for me, because I was new into the field. I was exploring everything, and I knew that if I get mastery in terms of the research methods and like managing my own research, and that was my goal initially in the first 3 or 4 years in my career. If I can plan a research from scratch, know what my stakeholders need, what my products need, and influence the product through my research, that was the right thing to do at that point of time. So I was kind of trying to become, not just becoming a jack of all trades here, but trying to learn more and more. And it actually really helped me later in my career. So right now, how it helps is I can see that there are a lot of different types of user group, and different user group have different perspectives. User group in terms of, I'm talking about, say, different cultures, different types of users and their needs. And simply to speak, there are different technology and different users and use of those technologies for different types of users. So you kind of, after doing a lot of research with different types of technology and research and users, you kind of get that their perspectives, and you learn those perspectives. So giving examples, like first time when I was taking up a research with in the accessibility theme, which is a kind of different theme altogether. I haven't, at that point of time, I have never done a project on accessibility. I didn't know how to ask questions. I was doing some research with visually impaired users. The first thing and the first learning which I got was the way they hold the smartphone. Like me and you, we would hold our smartphones like this, but somebody who is visually impaired would use the smartphone something like this. They won't hold and type like this. They would hold it like this because they can't see it. So these kind of things are not known to a lot of people. In fact, some of these insights, some of these observations were new to the product team as well, and of course to me. So
That's
after
very interesting.
after
Yeah.
doing a lot of these research, one after the other, I would also give example of international research. Like I didn't know, I'd done some research with you in China. And before doing that research, probably my knowledge of users in China and the ecosystem of technology which exists there, and their cultural life itself, and their interaction with those products, technology products, that was not known. What we assume is that the way we use products and technology ourselves, we assume that our users around the world might be using like that, but it's different. So after doing these diverse kind of research, working in different technologies, trying out different research methods, that gave me that kind of learning. So after a period of time, that is helping me out to be more of champion in terms of the user's voice, trying to understand the user's right perspective, the user's voice, and bringing it to my stakeholders, bringing it to my organization.
Yeah, it's quite interesting when you do research in another part of the world and it's so different from what you know, right? Any interesting cases that you can share that was surprising to you?
Yeah, so I've done a lot of international research, and I told you I was part of the Next Billion User team in Google, and the whole purpose of that team was to take up opportunities in different cultures, different markets, and try this out. So I've done some research in Brazil for the same product. Like so the goal there was, so in general, products, most of the technology products are like that, that it gets developed for a developed market initially, and then it percolates down or gets spread into emerging markets. Think of any technology product. It would be in the developed market where it gets popular, and then slowly it gets spreads out or percolates. We were taking a different approach. We were taking an approach of a NBU first, a next billion user market first approach for those products. We would develop the product in those markets, thinking about problem areas or user pain points in those markets. And then if it is successful in those markets, we would see there is some opportunity even for the developed markets as well. So So I did some research in Brazil, in Africa, in India, of course, and also did for the same products. I've done research in developed markets like EU, US. Interesting was my research. I think you were also part of that research, Elaine. Research in China, and there was a major learning for us. I'll give you an instance, like what we learned in one of the session, and I had my director of engineering who was accompanying me in that research, and we were showing one of the product which we developed for emerging market. And that product, I don't want to name that product, by the way, but we designed that product and it was doing good in a market like India. And we were trying to see if there is an opportunity for similar design product in China as well. We showed it to a few of the participants in China. And one instance, one of the participants looked into the interface and said, I don't see this is a product. It doesn't look like an app. In fact, that was a phone management app. But the participant in China said that this doesn't look like an app. What it looks like, it looks like a website, which means it's so empty. My screen is so empty because we designed those products, those apps, and the interface and the information architecture, even the visual design, in such a way that we follow minimalistic design, and which was very much liked by some of the cultures, some of the markets, some of the users in those markets. But when we took this to China, most of the users said that, is there something missing here? Is it not loading properly? And then there was a surprising insight. And when we looked into a lot of those visual designs in those popular local products in China, they looked little cluttered to us.
They're all jam-packed, right?
Yes.
Everything in one,
it's also about the culture. It's also about the script, like the Mandarin script.
The writing, the characters, yeah.
Yes. So what we were trying to do is we're trying to translate the English script into Mandarin and like creating an interface and putting it in front of the users, the local users. They didn't accept it. And therefore that triggered us, like we should be designing it in a totally different way. So, and that made a lot of impact. In fact, those research which we did in China, we took decisions to have a different version of the product altogether. So going forward, we had different version of the product, one for emerging market, a different one for a developed market, and a totally different one for the Chinese world. So
do you think it's essential for the team in developed worlds to actually physically be in the emerging market to actually see that? Yeah, I mean, now that like a lot of research is remote now, right? And then we don't travel as much yet. Do you feel it's essential for people to actually be in the country to understand that?
Yes, if you're developing a product from scratch, and if you are making major decisions in the product, I feel, and I'm a believer of this, and a lot of my team members, like a lot of my cross-functional team members who are designers, product managers, even leaders, directors who have accompanied me with me in my research, we all felt that after immersing ourselves in the culture of that country, of that market, of those users in those markets, we really learned more than what we were supposed to. So yes, to your question, it really makes sense, but totally understand that currently we are under pandemic doing research, especially if you want to now do a research in China, it's impossible. But there are other ways, like you can also include, and I'm talking about these kind of limitations where we are right now in the world. What can be done? There are other ways to do this. If you want to include somebody who is a local partner, they can do some research for you. You can do these research remotely as well if somebody is someone is present with the user in the local setting. Probably that is minimum, which is really feasible right now. So yeah, but I'm totally in the favor of doing some kind of ethnographic research, especially, and also cultural immersion if you're developing a new product.
Mm. Can you, okay, for the newcomers in, this room, can you define or explain a little bit more about ethnographic research and cultural immersion, just so that they get a better understanding of what you mean?
So ethnography is generally a method of a classical research method, wherein the researcher or the team of researchers generally be in the context of the user. You don't ask direct questions, rather you would observe users in their own settings. And in this case, probably you are doing more of an immersion, trying to understand how they perform their work. Now, ethnography in the current terms and in the professional world, we still use, as a user researcher, we still use that we are doing ethnography, but it's kind of different than what you would find as a definition of ethnography in books. The classical definition of ethnography would mention that a user, and ethnography has a background in sociology, wherein the researcher would spend maybe weeks, months together with a set of users in their life, living along with them, trying to understand their life, trying to understand their pain points, and then coming out with the insights. But in the current setting, in the professional world, if your objective is to develop a product, improve your product, bring out opportunities, we don't do ethnography in a classical sense. We still say that doing a cultural immersion is also an ethnography. When you go and meet the user in their original settings, that's what we call as ethnography as well.
Mm. Yeah, so we brought Sanjay to eat some weird stuff when he was in China. And that's part of the cultural immersion too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to the topic of how do you maximize impact of user research, right? So how can you share how you were able to do that, like especially amongst so many designers and non-researchers in the context that you worked in?
Well, impact is something which is, I think, is the tangible purpose of any UX researcher's job. You ask any UX researcher in the field, and what they would say is what they like. And most of them, they would say that what they like as part of their job is to make major influence in the product, major influence or impact in the teams or the product, or overall in the orgs as well. So impact is something very crucial in our careers. And I have started realizing that after being part of the UX research teams, different stages. So so impact again is dependent on multiple aspects. For instance, impact is different for different kinds of team and different kinds of orgs. It also depends upon the maturity of UX research or UX in the org. So impact for me, if I give my example, initially when I was a single researcher army in a bigger org with so many designers, the impact for me is that was I able to respond to all the research questions? Was I framing the right research questions initially? Am I able to use the right research method? Am I delivering at time? Am I able to satisfy my stakeholders, my designers, and are they able to take right decisions based on my research? So that was good enough impact for me initially. When I scaled up, when I was leading the teams, the definition of impact changed a lot. The next step for the impact would be like influencing the major decision in the product. The major decisions in the product, such as if more and more the product teams or your stakeholders are asking your opinion, and it's not your opinion, but they want to know how would users perceive the changes in the product or the features. That is where is slowly you are trying to develop your impact into the product, which means you are now becoming a champion for your user. You are now becoming an ethical voice for your user, and you are bringing those user voices in the table, with all the other stakeholders, all the other team members. So the second step, I would say, for impact in a different setting or a slightly scaled up version of impact would be helping the right decisions at times. And decisions could be like moving forward with a prioritized set of features in a product, taking a decision that there are a part of the product or features which the team thinks that probably this is going to be an awesome feature, but it's not very useful for users. So bringing that back to the team and taking a decision and owning the decision together to kind of cancel some of those feature requests or feature development to save some time as well. So those are what I call as impact. So the first set of impact, as I said, was answering the right research question, doing the research right. The second set of impact would be enabling the data-centered or insight-centered decision making. Probably the even more the next step of impact would be like elevating the user experience, not just for a product, but overall thinking of the whole org. I would say you can call org, you can call for currently I work in Amazon, and I can call Amazon as an org. I can call my bigger team with so many engineers, so many product managers working on different tools in my platform. That could be an org for me. So overall,
Right? Okay.
elevating the practice of user research, that I would call as next level of impact, which means not just you have to evangelize for your users, but everybody in the team like started realizing going forward that this is the way to go. So basically, some of your work is getting done by some of the other function people. Probably they are the ones who are now able to answer the research questions themselves. They are the ones who can carry out some of the tactical research themselves and inform the decisions. So I would call impact at different stages for user research and for user researchers. So it depends upon different phases, different maturity of different teams and different orgs.
So for less mature organizations, for example, tech startups, and like even in Canada or in the US, like maybe 80-90% of companies are SMEs or tech startups, and maybe the 2% are the Amazons and the Googles. Like, how would these designers or researchers show the impact of research when the CEOs are like, hey, we need to get this out of the door next month, right? No time. Like, what do you do? Like, what's your advice?
Yeah, I get advice. I don't have a first-hand experience working directly on startups, but I have worked on small startup-sized teams in Google, and I can share what has worked out for me. And also, I also do some consultancy with some of the startups for user-centered design and applying user-centered design for them. So I can share some of the experience. In fact, it's rather more crucial for those companies, those startups, to take up user research. It's more crucial for them than bigs like Google's or Amazon's, because the risk is high for them. After talking to a lot of tech startups and the owners of those tech startups, what I realized that, and whenever I try to evangelize the user-centered design methods for them, I keep hearing there are two different reasons why these tech startups say that it's not feasible for them to do user research. One, which is kind of also a red flag. Many of these tech startups, they feel that they really know a lot about their user, and I would say that's a red flag, because we might get into a trap where we believe that we are the users, we are one of the users, and we believe, and we tend to believe that, and there is more of a tendency to think that people will really acknowledge what we think is right. But that may not happen. And there is a big risk, because these tech startups, they work on a single idea, and they spend so much time developing those ideas. The point is, why to develop an idea and spend time engineering a solution just based on your gut feeling? Rather, why not test it with your users? Why not test it multiple times with your users? That would really give you more perspectives. And even if it doesn't gives you more opportunity, at least it can give you some kind of a validation of your concepts. At least whatever decisions you are taking, whatever investments you're making in the engineering, in the product, you are taking the right step at every time. So that is one reason. I feel that one of the reason, as I said, some of the startups feel that they really know well about their users, which is a myth. The second one is many of the startups believe that there is a lot of cost involved in doing research. Cost not in terms of doing the research, but also in terms of the effort. Why? The question is, I have a startup of say 6 people. Why should I hire a UX researcher at this phase? Let me proceed, launch the product, get the funding, and then we'll see how it comes. So we're not saying that. So my suggestion to some of those startups is, it doesn't matter whether the research is done by a researcher or a research is done by somebody in the team. Basically, the research is more democratized. Like anybody can do this research, provided it's done right. Little bit of talking to the user, little bit of understanding your user is much better than not doing it at all. So, and again, it's a myth. It's a wrong perception that the research takes time. It's a wrong perception that research is costly on time taking. There are ways, there are methods to do agile research. There are a lot of these tech startups who do very agile kind of research methods, very interactive research methods. For example, there are some ways to do very solution-oriented research methods, such as participatory design. I suggest them to take those up, involve the whole team. If the team is very small, they can involve the whole team to participate along with your participants or your potential users to understand their real pain points. Let them play with the design prototypes very early. You would learn a lot during that phases. So in summary, I would say again, for tech startups, doing research is very crucial, and probably somebody might have to do iterative research at every phase of your product. You might want to do research to understand and be close to your users, and always be confident that what you are building is really going to be useful going forward. And it can also help get the fundings for the tech startups as well. Like when VCs or when your funding partners would hear that the product has evolved based keeping the users in mind, and going forward, there won't be a problem with the users to use this product, or going forward, the product is going to get a lot of users and grow to a lot of users. If they get that kind of confidence, probably funding becomes easy for tech startups. So yeah, it's very crucial for tech startups.
Sometimes I even wonder if it's the name UX research, like, because once you say research, people think, oh my God, it's going to take a few years and it's going to cost a lot of money, right? Like if it's the labeling that also turns some companies off, especially the smaller ones.
Yeah, but again, the perceptions have changed of late. I see a lot of, I support a lot of startups. I'm talking to a few of them, and I see that they are also into user-centered design methods. They take care of their users, and they know what they're building and what parts of their product, what features of the product, how users perceive them. So it's not about, like, research is a long-term activity as it is being always perceived. There are agile methods to do research as well.
Yeah. Okay, classic question. Usually, at least what I also find is when you're talking to people who are not from our same background in UX research, they're more used to like market research, like surveys, focus groups, right? how do you convince them, like it's not the same, it's complementary maybe? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, yeah. This kind of questions comes to me and some of my team members every time, almost every week. Like even not just from outside, but many of the different teams within my current org, they tend to try out a research. They tend to do research with some goals. I get a question that say, I'm planning to do this survey. I want to collect some data about the new feature launch which I'm doing, and I want this to be like scaled up. I want a quantitative answer to my research question, and therefore can you help me with that? So my answer to those is like, really research, the type of research which you take up, it really depends upon your problem statement. You got to understand one question. One is, who are your users? How are they going to use your product, and which phase of the product you are right now? Are you at the end phase of the product? You are trying to understand the usability of your product with the users. Probably what you need is some kind of a usability study. If you are trying to understand your problem statement, you might need different kinds of qualitative research, more generative qualitative research. You might try that out. If you have some hypothesis already defined, if it's already a product in itself, you want to take a major decision based on some of the clearing some hypothesis, probably that's the time when you would like to do a survey. Or you want to really understand the market, you might want to do a survey. Each of these research methods are meant for different types of research problems and the phases of the product where you are. You can't mix them. It's like trying to draw an analogy with, say, a medical profession. Like for every disease, there are different medication. You can't mix them. And as a researcher, my job is also to consult some of those teams, some of those people who want to take up research like this, to kind of give them right direction and take up the right set of research methods, which would solve their right problem. Because they might be dealing with some decision, they want to take some decision, and they want to take up research to help that decision. So the right method, use of right method would help it.
So typically a question would be, how can 8 to 12 users represent the Indian market or the China market, right? Because, the sample size is so small, right? How do you deal with that?
See, you're right. 8 to 10 users can represent, but it's not about representing the whole market in itself. It's representation in the context of your research question. So if, for example, if you want to test a particular product which you have developed, maybe you have a design for that product, you have prototypes, or you have actually the product already developed, engineered product, and you want to see whether the navigation works for, maybe if it's a digital product, say on a mobile or computer, then you want to test the navigation or information architecture or visual design. What you need is to do a usability study, and usability study is good enough done with, say, 8 to 10 users, because the 80% of the findings which you would get with your initial set of users itself. Further, if you want to do more studies, more interviews, more usability studies, you're going to just fine tune your insights, not much. So it will be more of incremental. But on the other hand, if you really want to understand the market, if you want to segment the users, if you want to launch a new product and see how, which type of user group would be your potential user group for this one, probably that is the time when you would need to do a bigger sample survey. And you might need to understand the perspectives of so many different types of users, different age groups, different genders, and also like different education level, probably different lifestyle. You need to understand like where my product would fit in. And that is the time when you would do a bigger survey. So the sample size doesn't depend upon the market in itself. The sample size of your research, whether qualitative or quantitative, would depend upon your particular research question, how broad that is.
So how do you actually, like, what strategies do you use, like when you collaborate with these stakeholders to, convince them?
Yeah, so stakeholders is an important aspect of our role as UX researchers. I have worked with various types of teams, various types of stakeholders. Um, some of them I won't call as stakeholders, some of them I would call as partners. What has really worked out with me is partnering very close with your design team members. Have a single UX voice where your UX research team, your UX design partner, and you as a UX researcher can formulate a team within the product and have a single voice to represent the user side of the story.
Mm.
So you would call them as not stakeholders, but partners. There are other partners as well you might have, and different orgs have different kinds of structure. So what has also worked with me is partnering very closely with data scientists. If some of the orgs have that kind of role, that really worked well, because data scientists are also in the role where they're generating insights or stories out of the data. And that's again a part of very common in terms of like a role of a UX researcher as well. You're generating decisions based on the insights from the users. So very similar role. So
Oh, can
they're
you
also the
explain a little
partner.
bit more about data scientists? Like, do you do first do the qualitative and get the insights, or it's more from the data? Like, how does that kind of piece together, from two different angles, right?
Yeah, so I've played the role of a quantitative researcher as well in some of the orgs, because I do have that kind of skills as well. And what I have realized is there is a difference in terms of role of a data scientist and a quantitative researcher.
Mm.
A quantitative researcher or even qualitative researcher focus more in terms of the experience of the users, be it attitudinal, like which is like you want to understand how user would perceive or what is their mental model of using a product, what are their pain points. That's more of qualitative or even quantitative researchers, because quantitative researchers do a lot of surveys to understand the data at scale. On the other hand, data scientists, I have seen the kind of roles they have is to look into the behavioral data, which means the product is out there. Say, I'll give an example of my current product. I work in the seller platform, where the platform which is used by sellers and vendors globally to sell on Amazon. So my partners who are data scientists would look into the different profiles of the users or different sellers, would try to create some models to understand like how these sellers are impacted by the fees, how these sellers are impacted in terms of some change in the policy. So they come out with these kind of data stories, how these sellers have are impacted by the economic slowdown currently. We are going through some recession. We are moving towards some kind of recession and economic slowdown. So these kind of studies they would do. So there is a difference in terms of the role of a quantitative researcher and data scientist. And to your question, partnering with some of these roles really help. The other kind of stakeholders, when you ask your question, like what are different stakeholders and how to influence them, the key stakeholders whom I work with whom I have been working are the product managers, because they are the ones who champion the product. They are the ones who need to take or own the decisions. So being close to them, having a close relationship with them, working relationship with them, and helping them out. And I'm not just referring to only product managers, but also top leaders if they are taking major decision in your product. The role of researcher is to enable, I would say, decision making, which is more data centric or insight centric or user centric. So many times you got to take hard decisions in your product. And if those decisions are taken based on the evidences from the user side, and that comes from the research, probably that is where you are playing your role. So yeah, they are again a strong stakeholders with whom you can create a lot of impact. I would also say there are other kind of roles in the company where where I have collaborated with other customer-facing roles, such as even sales team or even marketing team. That really helps because they are the ones who would take up some of the insights from your research and apply them into some of the campaigns they would try to run. They would be selling selling a bigger product based on some of the insights you would draw. If you find that this particular feature is really liked or preferred by a lot of my users, I have seen some of my partners who are salespeople, they have picked that up and used it as a campaign. When we sell products, I'm giving an example of, say, Samsung's mobile when I was working part of Samsung. So some of my research really informed that these are the salient features which in the next version of mobile, next launch of mobile, these are the features which users are really liking. So they would go ahead and create campaigns around that. They would say that these are the 3 new salient features which is coming up in the new version of Samsung mobile phone. So they are a great stakeholders and their partners. And that is again a way for you as a researcher to make impact. Like you are making impact in different phases with different types of stakeholders, with leaders, with product managers in taking decisions, and also stakeholders such as sales team and marketing team as well.
So how do you actually build those solid collaborations like with these other stakeholders and deliver?
I can give an instance from what I learned. I was not good at that very long back. So I was more of a siloed researcher trying to do more research and then deliver my outcome to these stakeholders. I got a tip from one of my mentor. The question which I asked, my dilemma was that I'm delivering right. I'm answering. My research is able to deliver the answers to those research questions which everybody's facing, and it's able to help the products. But what I'm missing is then my stakeholders are not believing on me. They're not asking me, how do I create more influence? How do I make them believe on the data more? Instead of me delivering, how do they start believing more and more in the insights? How can I do that? So the tip which I got from a mentor was that what can work out here is if they own the research themselves. Like you be the facilitator. You don't own the research this time. You have done enough research. You have owned many research. But going forward with some kind of stakeholders, what you can also try out do is let them do the research, let them own the research, let them lead the research. So at that point of time, what I realized is that you need partners in your stakeholders to be the partners in your research. So at that point of time, I was involving even my leaders, my directors, of course, my design partner and product managers who are working with me closely to be an observers in my research. They would travel with me to do immersions. I was talking about some of these immersions where a lot of my team members would travel with me, do the research together. I would let them lead some of those research, ask questions directly to the users. The perception really changed. I kind of changed my role there. What I used to do then is, after those research sessions with the users, we would continue discussing. When the participant would leave, what we would do is we would again keep debating. And my role there was to bringing back those product questions and decisions for which we were doing this research. And those decisions would come out during those discussions itself. So basically, we would take decisions directly in our research, immersion studies, or travel itself. There was no need for us for me going forward to present the outcome from research and then have a common table where people would take decision based on those insights. The insights were evolving even during every research session, and that really helped me.
Do they ever go, oh, I don't have time to travel with you to China for 10 days? Like, do you ever have to convince them to even go with you?
Um, so it again, I would say it depends upon different organization cultures. I never faced this because we really got benefited. We took major decisions which really which made or break the product which we were designing. So my stakeholders started believing more and more on research. So when we did some of those difficult projects, taking time to travel, people were ready. In fact, I had to tell them that, okay, I can't take so many people with me today. But it was kind of reverse, that everybody was planning to go and learn and try out
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Okay. So how have you been able to convince different stakeholders who are top leaders to align towards research? Like before they have experienced the research or the immersion, how do you convince them to go or be involved?
Yeah. Yeah. So again, I would say it's also depend upon the scope or maturity of an org. And I have more instances about convincing stakeholders from my earlier phase of my career when I was working for Samsung. And as I said, I was the only researcher at that point of time in the whole team, trying out different things and also evangelizing research. And that was the time when I was also planning to step up and increase the scope of the research in my team. Like I was trying to build a team, scale it up more. So in order to get funding uh, for for more research and more team members, I have to evangelize it more. So what really worked out again was bringing out those stories from the field to those stakeholders. I remember what really worked out once for me is um, so I can give you an instance what happened and where it moved really. There was a product for Samsung. It was a smartphone which was about to get released. We were all ready, and I was doing some testing. It was a smartphone, a new smartphone model, which was designed for an emerging market, and it was the cheapest smartphone available on earth. Like Samsung pitched or that was the salient point at that point of time, and it was based on a new operating system which was owned by Samsung, and this was a major release. And I was doing at the last phase of the product, I was doing some research with a lot of users. Since it was a cheap device, not I would say a very budget device meant for users who would use this as their first smartphone, there were a lot of hardware features which was missing. We took a call to not have a good camera or remove some of the sensors on the smartphone. So during one of the research, I took a video of a user who was trying to use this phone, a model phone, and this was not released. We were doing this maybe the 1 month just before the release, and we had this beta version of the phone model ready, and we were giving it to the users to try that out. I saw one of the user was trying to use this phone, and this did not have the proximity sensor. You know what a proximity sensor on a phone is? When you bring it close to your ears, the phone screen will go off, which means even if it touches your ears, it won't have the touch, like it won't make a wrong touch on the phone. We didn't have that in that product because we wanted to make it a budget phone. We reduced some of the hardware. It didn't have that proximity sensor. So what was happening is this user would bring the phone close to ear, and then that would touch something. And the other thing was because of the proximity sensor not being there, after 1 minute, the phone would go off, the screen would go off. The user was an emergent user, not a savvy user using the smartphone for the first time. The user did not know how to put off the phone because the screen was off, would complete his call on the phone, but won't know how to put it off. So this was a major flaw in the design. And I reported this, and then I did test this. It was such a small thing. We never realized this. And I brought this in front of the top level stakeholders, top leaders. And we had to take a call to postpone this launch.
Wow.
And this was a major impact. And And that gave me visibility, on my team a visibility, that yes, user research really brings value. It was not a case where I'm bringing value to like improve a product, but also taking a major decision to kind of curb some of those risks which would come up when you launch a product, a flawed product. So yeah, so these kind of experiences, these kind of major decision making when you make and you help your stakeholders, even top leaders, that really gives you visibility, and that really moves them. And some if one of if in some of the times, if some of these stakeholders are very top leaders, they can really move mountains for you. Then like they become, from a stakeholder, from a skeptical stakeholder, they now become your advocates of user research.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. Okay, maybe let me just ask one more question. I will open it to the floor. Like, okay, so how do you measure the impact of research?
Yes, the impact of research, you can't measure by the way, it's not quantifiable at all. It's not tangible for you to measure. But there are some signs, some hints you can get as part of being in the team for a longer time. You would know that probably you are making value in terms, or your teams, your research teams are making value in the org. Few signs, such as one, so initially you might have to evangelize research. I'm talking about small companies where there is no research culture or UX culture that much. You might have to evangelize, but slowly when you see that some of your stakeholders are involving you in some decision making, they are trying to take some decision based on the user's insights, that is one sign. You would see that probably your research is making value. Again, the decisions are very important. If you're able to help some of the product decisions, or some of the stakeholders take decisions based on user insight, then those are the ones, and I gave you some examples of those. Those are the ones where you see, and that is when you see that there is some impact happening. The other things are such as, we might find the other stakeholders who are not researchers, not designers, they would be more than willing to take up research on their own. Like they would need some consultancy, hand holding initially, and getting them to, some direction how to do this research, but they would start doing research on their own. That is where you see that there is a cultural change in the org, and that is again one measure of impact, which means you are impacting, your research is now impacting multifolds. It's all the research in your org or in your team is not just done by your hand or your team's hand, rather other stakeholders, maybe PMs, designers themselves, they are taking up research on their own. And then you shift your perspectives, your role in such a way. You are not taking up all tactical research. You are more strategic. You and your team, your research team becomes more strategic in nature. You're thinking about long-term goal of the product, long-term goal of the research. You're trying to hone the processes so that other people are enabled or encouraged to do research on their own. You're also consulting more than doing the research on your own. You're consulting them, giving them directions to take up research. So that is another impact, you would say. Slowly you're improving the scope of research and the culture of research in your team.
Great. Oh, just one last thing is, how do you balance qualitative and quantitative research?
Qualitative and quantitative research doesn't require balance, which means it comes up, because I have seen, and I have a proponent of having skills on both sides, which means whatever I'm believer of whatever it takes kind of research on a product. It all depends upon the product. It all depends upon the research question, what you are trying to inquire about. And qualitative or quantitative research or the methods would come up, and those are always secondary. The preference is always to kind of know the whys through the qualitative and also scale it up in terms of how much using the quantitative research. So I always prefer to triangulate the data or any kind of findings through both these methods. Try out qualitative methods and also scale up through quantitative methods. Triangulation in the sense, like both of these data should point out to the same outcome, same insights. If they differ, then probably you might have to look into one of the methods or try out something else. But most of the time, you would hear the same stories in different ways through qualitative or quantitative methods. So I'm a believer that any researcher should have both kinds of skill, and the team should have the acceptance for both kind of research and insights coming up from anywhere.
Okay, why don't we open up to the floor? Anybody has any questions for Sanjay? You can speak out and we'll let you show your face too. Anyone?
I can read the questions we had in the chat. We have just 2 of them actually.
Okay.
And the first one is a little bit off topic, but still there's a question from Daniel who is wondering what weird food did you eat during the Chinese trip?
Yeah, what was the most memorable food that you experienced there?
What is the most favorable what?
What
Memorable
weird
food, yeah. That
China
you
trip?
found, yeah.
Food. Okay.
Totally not related to the topic, but I'm sure everybody was curious. What did you eat?
Maybe not me, but I remember some of my team members who were with me, and we were on the same table, Elaine, and somebody was eating hairy crab.
Yeah, hairy crab. Yeah.
You remember that? So
I eat hairy crabs.
oh, okay.
Very tiny crabs. Yeah.
Yeah, I still have the pictures of those food.
It was a lot of work to get the meat out, right?
Yeah, I didn't try that. I was going to try that.
Interesting. Yeah, that's so cool. I wanted to go on a research trip with you.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, next question.
Yeah, the next question, which is the last question we have today, is from Karen. And the question is, qualitative research produces huge amount of data, and we often need to combine data from various sources. Other third-party research tools, whether they be tagging or organization, synthesis, or repository, that you can recommend to make the job efficient and also help all the stakeholders to see the aggregate data and thus the big picture easily?
Yeah, that's a great question, Karen. And yes, this is something which was a question to me as well, maybe a few years ago. I was trying to look for a way to present a body of work, some of those research which was being done by my team, myself, and some of the other designers in our team, all of us working on the same space, related research. And how do we collate this data? Where do we keep this data? And these research was not just qualitative, but some of those research was also like analyzing analytics or the user data, like user use of a product, and the analytics of those also sheds a lot of insights. So those were also insights coming out. Then there were quantitative surveys which we were doing. So there was a lot of sources of these insights which was coming up. There are different types of users, but all of these research is coming from different teams, different people. How do we collate this? I guess that's a question. We created a in-house tool for that. So I'm talking about an example which we are doing in a practice which we are doing in Amazon in my current team. We have a portal which we call as a dashboard. It's an inside dashboard, wherein it's open for everybody in the org. I would say whole of the team who work in the same space. There are multiple researchers, not just my team. There are many other teams who are working in the same space, slightly different. So they also come out with some of those insights in their research. They are open to collate and put those insights in some tagged form. So it's a web tool which we have created. we had this muscle power to create that, and we had a lot of data. Therefore, we use some kind of tool like this. But other than that, if you want suggestion in terms of what kind of tools, ready tools, which can be used here. So product dashboards, uh, there are tools, which is one of the tool called product dashboard. That's also an interesting tool where people can collate a lot of data coming from multiple sources, even and it's very easily searchable by a lot of team members, your stakeholders. They can also contribute, tag, comment on those insights. So I know of product dashboard, and what else? Um,
Any
yeah,
that are on the market, like not just in-house up to Amazon?
we did explore a few. We were not really satisfied with the scope of that, because we wanted this to be open to everybody, and like this was also limited in terms of license. So it also depends upon how big is your team or the scope of contributors to this repository. You can use SharePoint to be very, very simple. You can categorize your SharePoint in some way. For quantitative data, you can create dashboards internally. Tableau is a way to create your quantitative data dashboards. You can use that tool.
Blue, yeah.
Yeah, for
Okay.
quantitative data. For a lot of qualitative data, as I said, there is a product which I know as product dashboard. That's the one. But yeah, for our purpose, we were not really satisfied with the scope of any of these ready to use off the shelf tools. So we created our own.
Right. Okay. Any more questions?
I have a question. Hello, Sanjay.
Hey,
Anya.
Yeah, I really enjoyed working with you for the China project back in like 2018. Yeah, that experience was also an adventure for me. And I remember like we have a good mix of like different research methods. So yeah, I also learned a lot from you. And thanks for your sharing today. It was very inspiring. So my question is, like, because the product cycle for the Western companies, especially for multinational companies, is super long, while the other part of the world, like you just mentioned, Google is exploring the next billion market. So for this emerging market, actually the development time, development is much faster. Like China is 10 times faster than the US market. So like how like we can balance these two sides? Like for example, after 2 months of the research, maybe the emerging market already pivot to another direction.
That's a great product kind of question, a business strategy question. And I can answer that in terms of the positioning of UX research and its role in a very fast-paced business and very fast-paced release cycle kind of environment. I can tell you that and I felt that when I moved from working in Samsung to Google to now Amazon, the release cycle are totally different. Samsung, you might know that it works in very fast release cycle. You might see that every few months, maybe a few weeks, probably they might be releasing a lot of phone models out there. And it also works in very high pace release cycle. So the point is, for UX research and how it's positioned for this kind of environment is that UX research, I would say, and the insights are a continuum. It's not for a particular release or particular product. It's for a whole product line. The kind of research which you are trying to do. And for example, the kind of research which we did in China, that did not inform only just one product release. It is a sticky insight, a set of insights which had a longer shelf life, and more, like for several years, not just the same product, but any other product which we were trying to design for China or launch for China, the research really helped those past research really helped inform those decisions as well. So again, there are ways to do tactical research at a fast pace in agile cycle, but it's an important aspect for any UX research team to balance more of a strategic research, which has a long shelf life. Like you are doing a research. So for example, the research which we did in China was more of a foundational study, not just informing the next release or immediate need, but for a long-term need. But we also did a lot of tactical research during that time to try and see if we can help the next release, which is happening within, say, 2 months from now. And the team is already designing some of the components, some of the features. Can we help do some study quickly to inform design? So it's a good balance one has to make in a UX research team to keep the impact going, doing both kinds of research.
Okay, thanks for the answers. Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? I think Karen had another one.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, please just ask. Yeah, yourself.
So my second question is, you briefly mentioned that the research is a de-risking activity. And so the quickest and cheaper way of finding out whether the product or feature will be useful or not. But oftentimes when in our efforts to try to find out whether it's helpful or not, people in user interview or in survey, they ask questions like, do you find this helpful or useful? And on a scale of what, 0 to 5. So it's just not a great way of actually finding out whether it's useful. So I'm wondering what would be an ideal way of finding out actually it's useful, other than directly asking, or just one way would be like what kind of workaround people are resorting to and how much they're willing to pay for that workaround. But are there any alternative ways to find out that feature is actually useful that people are willing to pay for?
Yeah, so I have seen that there are many people, when they conduct this research and asking questions like, how would you rate the usefulness of this feature? And ideally, those kind of responses do not help so much. It's rather important in these qualitative research, and I think you are referring to qualitative research here. It's more important for us to understand the whys and not how much, because if you ask them to rate something in a scale of 1 to 5, it's more of like you are grading their usefulness. Usefulness is not easy to grade. Like, what will you learn if they grade it as 3 or grade it as 4? What difference that would make in terms of the decisions in your product? Rather, it's more important for us to know, and you talk about usefulness, we would ask them like, okay, what kind of, first start with some kind of problem areas where exactly they face problem. If there is no product, if you're designing a new product and you are trying to see that whether this product is useful for them, you would try to understand how their life is right now and where this product would fit in. And when we introduce a prototype of a product or the product in itself to those users, that is the time it would come up from them. Like, you don't even have to ask. They might come up that, okay, there is a gap in their life probably, or there is a problem they are facing, and is this product or this feature is able to solve the problem or not? And that is how you know the usefulness. Can they tie down their problem with this solution? If you get a good combination, if you get a good alignment of the problem which they have in their life with the solution, that is when you feel that, okay, your product is doing some purpose. They would use it. There's no point in asking them how frequently you would use it. If the problem is important for them, and if the problem occurs to them more and more, and if you solve that problem through your product, it is obvious that they would be using it, and they would be using it frequently. So yeah, to answer your question, instead of directly asking how useful the product would be, go with trying understand the problem, try and see if the solution fits the problem.
Great. Okay, anything else?
I think
I have a
Yes.
question. Oh, sorry. Anyone?
There was just a last minute question in the chat from Daniel. What are some of, I can ask or you can ask? I
maybe
can
I
just read.
Danny,
maybe
you
I
want
can-
to ask a question?
maybe I can ask for
Oh, sure,
myself.
sure.
Yeah, so this time it's gonna be related to UX research. So for most of us who are just starting UX research or wanted to learn more about UX research, I'm curious what are some of your go-to place or platforms to continuously learn about
Research.
research. I won't say tips and tricks because you got tons already. Maybe some cool books for us to read. It would be awesome.
There are a few books, but probably what I would suggest is, instead of trying out reading books, what would also help is a lot of these UX research blogs. There is a blog from NN Group, Nelson Norman Group. That's an awesome place. You would find out the blogs from all categories of research, like qualitative research, different types of methods, speaking about how to evangelize research in different orgs, what is the role of UX researcher, education about UX research. That's one of the go-to place. Still, I've been following that for last, maybe since the time I got into this field, maybe 12, 13 years ago. I'm still keeping as one of bookmarks, and I go there, get feeds from there. So there are a few of these blogs which are really interesting. There is another one which is called UX Matters. I can share a few of those. I have a lot of those bookmarked, and I believe that. And the second thing which I also believe is that UX research or even designing is also more of a craft. It's not learned through books. It's rather more of doing some internship, taking up some actual projects. That really helps. Working with a mentor, that really works.
Great. Maybe I can get a download from you later on, so that after the event we can share it to our social media platforms.
Oh yes, sure.
Yeah, you can send it to us.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's a question about PhD and masters. Irem, you want to say this? You want to ask this?
She couldn't come on the video.
Yeah, I see that. I see the question. So no, the answer is no. You don't need a PhD or master's. If you see the job roles of UX researcher, at least in my company, I see most of these job roles which mentions that this is more of a higher desirable skills or qualifications, but it's not mandatory qualification. You don't need a PhD or master's to be starting as a UX researcher. Maybe a few projects initially, maybe an internship, maybe a boot camp would be also good for you to start.
Okay, I have a question for you, Sanjay. What are some of the UX trends that are upcoming, you think?
You mean UX research trends?
Yeah, UX research trends, yeah.
UX research trends, basically UX research trends would go along with the user trends. And then I would say a few things which I hear a lot, and I can enumerate a few of those. One of them is like there is, so how UX research field or profession is that most of the UX researchers right now are in these companies such as Meta or Google or maybe Amazon or Microsoft. Like I read some posts that probably 60% of the professional UX researchers, mid-career UX researchers, are one of these companies. And these are the companies which are driving what is the trend. So if you talk about Meta has come up with metaverse. So a new thinking or a new world for the user. So a lot of these research is towards that. The use cases of Meta or metaverse, which means, say, applying metaverse in travel, applying metaverse in education. How would that be? So those kind of research is trending. The other aspect of trending UX research is around AI as well. So humanizing the AI is another topic which I hear a lot, which means these AI bots, such as for Amazon, it's Alexa, or for Google, it's called Google Now. Okay, Google. Or Siri, these kind of AI. There is an approach to make it more humanized. That's some of the research or design work which is going on, making it more proactive, trying to see how Alexa or Google fits in users more connected world for future. So that's another area where a lot of research is going on. Talking in terms of AI, for AI and ML to work, you need a lot of training data. And data, most of this data are generally user data, the training models. More data is always good, but most of this data is coming from, you can say, mainstream users, users like me and you. The data which we are producing, that's being used to train the data. But it's not fair though, because it's not fair for a lot of users whom we might count in terms of diversity and inclusion. They are not mainstream mainstream users then, and which means if we are not using those data from non-mainstream users, probably the models which we are building out of AI and ML are not fair enough for them. So making those models more fair, and applying those fair models into various like big AI decisions in the org, such as, say, what should come up when somebody searches on Google, what should come up when somebody searches catalog or selections on Amazon website. Like, these are based on some of these models which we are working behind. So how to make those models more fairer, taking care of the diversity and inclusion of the users. That is another area where a lot of researchers are interested. So that's another trend.
How about, now, like, everything is tracked, like all the IoTs and, everything is tracked. That would that impact our field in terms of, how like qualitative research that's done right now, it's very manual in a way, super costly to research, recruit people sometimes. But what if users are already tracked like 24/7 and monitored somehow, right? Like, do you see that impacting what we do?
Yeah, so there is a trend as well. If you have heard about this new way of doing, I spoke about ethnography earlier, and I spoke about like how involved it is. Like, if you want to really study classic ethnography and do this classic ethnography, it would take you months to do this. You are understanding the users. Now, the users are not just physically available. Users are available in the social network as well. They have their traces. We have our preferences. We do things online. So there is a variation of ethnography called nethnography, which means nethnography reports are the way to understand the segment of the users, based on their behavior on the social network. So to your point, yes, users can be tracked, their data can be tracked, and you can actually dig out a lot of analytics based on that and create data stories out of it. We do that a lot. We do that in my current role. I also try doing that as well, and trying to triangulate the data with qualitative and quantitative findings. So that makes the story very stronger and convincing as well. But there is another aspect to it. When you're tracking users, The other aspect which pops up is privacy of these users as well. And that's again another area of trending research, because more and more you hear about these news of these companies getting into into this scanner of like privacy of these users getting into picture. So yeah, so privacy of the users and their data is again an area of trending research for UX researchers.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're like time's up almost. So thank you so much, Sanjay, for your really in-depth sharing of all these
Great.
you
Thank you.
great insights. And yeah, how do people keep in touch with you if they want to reach out?
I'm available on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn, okay.
And that would be the best way for connecting. And
Okay.
I'm looking forward for more connections and open. And if you are getting into the field of UX research, if you are looking for some questions, if you're wondering how to take things up, let me know. I can help you with that as well. So you can connect.
Okay, thank you so much, Sanjay, for your time. And yeah. Okay, yeah, please yeah, go to LinkedIn to search for Sanjay's, and he'll you can get in touch with him.
I can type my LinkedIn handle here. Give me a minute. I'll just pull it up for you and just click here.
Yep, and please join us on our other social media like LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. And next month we'll have another speaker from Samsung.
So stay tuned for our social media page. If you haven't already, join us now. Have a good night, everybody.
Okay,
Enjoy your weekend.
We'll wait for Sanjay to put his handle and.
While we're waiting for Sanjay to share her LinkedIn profile, I have a great idea. Why don't we turn on our camera and have a group photo, guys?
That'd be great.
Okay, I will have one of my volunteer to help me snap a picture. Okay, just turn on your camera, guys. 1, 2, 3, cheers. Perfect. Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Lise. And then the rest of you have a great night. You guys are awesome.
Thank you, Sanjay.
Yay.
Thank you, guys.
We're able to pull out your handle. Let me try to find it for you.
Okay, let me see where this is, because my
okay, I think I have it here.
Yes,
right,
somebody already posted it.
Oh, you got it. Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you for your time. Bye.
Bye-bye.